Hello, thanks for joining me. Well, today is going to be a belt splicing video. We're going to splice some synthetic flat belt. And there's a ton of different types of flat belts. What I'm going to cover is a belt that is useful between half horsepower, a quarter horsepower, all the way up to about 2 or 3 horsepower. I have seen this belt run on a 5 horsepower lathe. It may be perfectly fine for it. It's a pretty thin belt, but it's extremely strong. But I'm not going to recommend it for a 5 horsepower lathe. But I feel fairly confident it will run on a 2 horsepower. Of course, the 2 horsepower is going to be probably 2 inches wide versus 1 inch wide or 1 1/4. There's a ton of different kinds of belts. Like here's one that's 2 millimeters thick. It's got a thick rubber layer and a nylon layer on the other side. This one here is 1.4 millimeter, I think. It's got a thick rubber layer on both sides and a nylon core. The nylon's called polyamide, and that's what all these belts are using. It's a type of nylon, very strong type of nylon. But we're going to cover this 1.2 or 1.3 millimeter belt. This is F1, and the reason we're going to cover this belt, it's F1 made by Habitat. But the reason we're going to cover making this belt is because I got a whole bunch of it, and it's really, really good belt. It's a 2-inch belt. Let's discuss some of the pros and cons of flat belts. Let's see, they require less power to drive. They're more flexible than a V-belt. They can go over a smaller pulley, usually, depending on the belt thickness. You can make the machines easier. Like if you want to build a pulley, like I did on my drill press, I made a flat belt wooden pulley. So it's pretty easy to make a aluminum or flat belt pulley, aluminum or wood. They're smoother. If you're not using a clip-on belt, which we're not going to cover today, or lace on, if you're using a glue belt, they're very smooth. And the biggest advantage of all is you can splice them on the machine. In other words, you can run it around a spindle, make the splice, and you don't have to take the spindle out. Some lathes, that's a huge advantage. Some lathes, it's pretty easy to do. The cons about a flat belt, that was all the pros. The cons are they're more prone to slippage, more expensive, harder to find, and I want to say they're hard to splice. They're not really hard to splice. It's just hard for the home shop to splice them because they haven't got the right tools. And so expense and having the right tools are 2 of the deterrents. And I've got at least part of those covered. I'm going to make some belting available at a reasonable price, cheaper than most places. So if you're interested in buying some belt and trying your hand at installing it, this will be a good video to watch. The other deterrent is the tools required to splice the belt are extremely expensive. When I say extremely, a belt grinder costs $800, $1,000. The tools, the heater to put it on with, this is a heater. Just an example of one of the many heaters available. That's $700 or $800. Probably more than that actually, but last time I looked at the price, they're $700 or $800. So obviously that's not a good option for most home shops. But I came up with an alternative. Here's one of my first tries for an alternative. Put these steel blocks in a toaster oven at 350, and then while they're still hot, you clamp that thing on the belt. And it works, but it's kind of hard to handle. It's heavy. That was my first attempt. But you'd be amazed at what I came up with to splice these belts. You ready for this? a hair straightener. Believe it or not, it's variable temperature, and the lowest heat setting is exactly what you need to splice a flat belt. So we're going to make a splice with a hair straightener. But first, let's discuss how to prepare the belt for. Wait a minute. Let's discuss belt tracking. Let's go take a look at my drill press here. Okay, we're looking at the pulley, the wood pulley I made on my drill press, and you'll notice the surface of the pulley is crowned. Now that's a fairly extreme crown. It doesn't really need to be that extreme. In fact, it's probably better if it isn't. But with the wood pulley and prone to warpage, that crown controls how the belt tracks, and I wanted to make sure it stayed tracking, so I made a fairly extreme crown on it. Just for fun, let's throw that belt off to one side. Okay. It's off to one side, I put tension on it, watch what it does. You see it come right back on? That was due to the crown. The belt will always track to the high spot on the pulley. If you've got a belt tracking problem, you can put a piece of masking tape on the center of the pulley and it'll ride up on top of the masking tape. That's not generally a good way to do it, but on a driven roller sometimes it'll wad up, and on an idler it doesn't hurt a thing. Here's another example. My belt sander, belt grinder. It's got crowned wheels. They're not crowned real high. But watch this. Throw it off to the side, turn it on. Self-centering. So that's something important to know about a flat belt. It'll always go to the center of a crown or to the high side. If I put a piece of masking tape right here on the edge, like several layers of masking tape, it would run off to the edge. It's going to go to the high spot and center on the high spot. Okay, several years ago, let's see, about 6 years ago, when I worked for a printing company, I was in charge of preparing belts and teaching people how to splice belts. And after I retired, I continued to make their belts. In other words, I cut them to length and prepared the ends. And preparing the ends is what you call skiving. And it's actually grinding a taper on the ends. So after I retired, I made this belt grinder. And it's kind of crude, but it works great. This is a spacer that kind of controls the angle. For this thickness of belt, I'm going to put this spacer under it. Anyway, it's got a belt on it. A lot of their belt grinders have a drum, which works good too. And to prepare the ends on there, I got one nylon side and one rubber side. So I want to grind them both. With this one, you can grind them both at the same time, like that. Okay, there we go. We've got a taper grind on those belts. But let's take a close look at that. Okay. What we're looking at here, different belts are different, but in other words, some belts have a thicker layer of rubber than others. But what we're gluing is the nylon. And you can glue the rubber, but it's not necessary and it adds a lot of complication. And in this particular belt, you don't need to, gluing the rubber adds no strength. It just makes it look nice. But what we want to do, this nylon, like right in here, is what the glue will stick to. This green area is rubber, on this belt. It's got rubber on this side, and glue will not stick to that rubber. So we want to measure that skive right there, the length of that skive, and it's about 3/4 inch. So that skive is 3/4 inch. And this is where it gets kind of confusing. When you measure your belt, you want to measure the total distance around the pulleys and add the skive for one end. You want to take the one with the rubber on it, take the shortest skive length, and add that much. So if you got a 52-inch belt, it's 52 3/4. So, okay, now we've got kind of a little balled up end on that. Just trim it clean. If there's any, see it's kind of frayed there, you want to get rid of that. Just trim it like that, just a tiny bit. Okay. You want to overlap them as much as you can without getting into that rubber. So about like that. But the other side now will show some of that belt surface material. It looks like you could overlap it, but you don't want to overlap it any more than that right there. Just like that. Okay. Now what we've got to do is be able to hold those. You want to hold them straight while you're heating them up. So to do that, there's a well-used belt guide. You could make a belt guide like this. That might be what you want to do. You got these clips here. You want to be able to see this side, so we're going to do it this way. Overlap it as much as possible on the short skive side. Just like that. Now you can clamp the belt heater on there. And this guide worked pretty good with this belt heater. It's designed for this belt heater. But our hair straightener doesn't quite work as well. I think it's a little bit wider. Yeah, it's wider than, I'd have to redesign that. So, we're going to make a different kind of belt guide. Works kind of. Okay, let's thread this new piece of belt here and check the length. I always get confused as to which way this twists up here. If you get the twist the wrong way, it runs backwards. I think I got it right. Either way, the belt length should be the same. Okay. Get the tensioner where we want it. Probably about right there. And just probably about right there. Now what I'm doing is I'm marking where the belts overlap right here. Except I don't have my pen. But I've already got a mark on here anyway. And we'll add 3/4 inch to that. Okay, there's our mark right there. And we're going to add 3/4 inch to it. If it's real critical, you'll want to measure that. What I'm doing here, I've got a lot of belt adjustment, so it's not so critical. But that's the length of the skive, or the grind on the end of the belt. and you only do it once. You add the length of one skive, even though you're skiving both ends. They overlap, so it's kind of confusing, but you just need to do one end. Okay, here's our belt grinder, and we're going to build this in a minute. It's got an adjustable angle right here, and this is kind of modeled after a commercially available belt grinder. It's got 60 grit sandpaper on there. Just put that in there and grind your belt. Put the belt right there to the end. And the angle on this, less of an angle would make a longer skive. And we want about a 3/4 to 1 inch skive. Let's see what I mean in a minute here. Now you can sit there and do like that, and it works okay. See there? I found this works a lot better. You don't want it on the high speed, because you don't want to melt the belt. See that little spot right there? That's something you need to watch out for. That little spot right there is where I had a piece of dirt underneath it, and it ground it down quicker. It'll be okay, but much worse than that, and it'll affect the strength of the splice. I'm doing it by hand because I'm close to where I need to be. It needs to be real thin. If you get too thin, it'll just start falling apart on the end. Oh, that's perfect there. Okay, now I've got the nylon side up, and this F1 belt has got rubber and nylon. Got the nylon side up, so now I want to grind the rubber side up on the other end. With that real thin on the edge there. I think that's about it. I'll go just a little bit more. That's it. Right there is where I had a piece of trash underneath the belt. It won't hurt a thing, but you gotta watch that. Now, when we glue this, we'll want to overlap this that far, because that rubber will not glue, but the nylon will. And this side is all nylon, so this side is not the side we need to go by. We need to go by the rubber side, like that. That's how much overlap you want. Probably a good idea to do like this. Set the overlap like that, or as much overlap as you can get without going into that green, and then mark the other side. Like that. That way, if you are in a position when you're trying to make the splice and you can only see this side, you'll know that you got the overlap right. Let's go make a splice. Okay, I want the rubber side against the pulley. And theoretically, The skive direction should be so that the outside is this way. I don't know if that makes sense. So that when it's going around pulleys, it doesn't try to peel up the splice. But in this situation, it probably doesn't make much difference. There we go. Now, of course, I got a belt tension adjustment, and that looks like it's going to work perfect. We're going to slide this pulley over. That way we've got plenty of belt to work with. Okay, something really important is this belt is held straight. And I made this jig right here. You could do it several different ways, I'm sure. It's just got some washers that clamp down on the edge of the belt. And stick the belt in there like that. Get that splicing area in the center. Like that. Hold it against one edge. Tighten that washer. Now, it's where, remember I said make that mark on the other side so you can see what you're doing. Set the amount of overlap there. Like that. Make sure it's good and tight because you don't want this to slip. Firmly up against that edge. Critical that it's straight. Okay, now that's in there fairly firm. Now we're going to apply glue right there. The glue we're going to use is called Fixol. It's about, it varies in price. I think you can get it on Amazon. I'll put a link down below though. It's about $35. Expensive glue, but it's got a good shelf life and it lasts forever. I mean, that quantity will last forever. You'll splice 100 belts with that. So, it's got a little brush in there. Just put the glue on 1/2. It doesn't hurt if the glue runs down the belt, but it doesn't look nice. No matter what, you'll see some glue seepage there. Now, I've got a piece of parchment paper. I suspect you could use any paper. We're only talking about 250 degrees. So nothing's going to catch on fire. Put that around your splice. That'll keep your hair straightener clean. Now I've turned this on. I don't remember how it works exactly. There we go. It's on, it says 248. I don't remember what that is Celsius, but that's perfect. I think it's about 120, something like that. As soon as that is solid, it'll be up to temperature, and it heats up pretty quick. Probably don't even have to wait for it. There it goes, it's heated up. Okay, right here, put that on there like that. You hold down firmly on that, and you put this block on there. It would have been a good idea to open those screw holes a little bit. It doesn't need a lot of force, it just needs to be firm on there. I don't think that the hair straightener can take too much. So there you go. Gonna wait 15 minutes. If you want to wait 20, it doesn't hurt anything. So we'll clean up a little bit here and let that sit. Okay, it's been about 18 minutes. 15 to 20 minutes is plenty of time. If you happen to leave it on there 30 minutes, it doesn't hurt a thing. Ah, looks like a good splice. Looks straight. That guide worked pretty good. Hopefully I got this belt the right length. Okay, here we go. Looking good, cracking good too. That's a little bit wider belt than what I had on it before. Some of you may have watched me drill a 3/4 inch hole with it, and there was slippage. And I'm hoping that wider belt will help that slippage. Yeah, I like it. Now let's see if I got enough belt take up on my tensioner for the small pulley. I'm sure I probably do. I sure hope so. Yeah, I like it. Well, that about wraps it up for today. I'll put some plans for this and this belt grinder in the description area below the video. I was going to possibly make some of this belting available. F1 belt is an extremely good belt. I've got a pretty good amount of it. Several hundred feet, and I got a good deal on it. And you'll have to buy the hair straightener, 20 bucks. The glue is 35, and then whatever the belt cost. And if I make that, there's some cost involved with that. My goal was to make it so normal hobby machinist could put a flat belt on, glue a flat belt on, a synthetic flat belt. This right here, it's not really hard to make, but if you're not set up for woodworking, it might be kind of hard to make. I didn't really want to get into manufacturing something like this, but it's not super hard to make, so maybe I'll make some of these up and sell them for 20 bucks or something. Anyway, thanks for joining me, and be sure to subscribe and ring that bell.